The relief of the legislation over with, but so much more to come. This is Heidi Hatch with another edition of Take Two. It is March 12th. Joining me is Maura Carabello from the Exoro group, who was nice enough to match me today. Rob Axson, we failed to mention that we were wearing yellow. Thanks for being here. Yes, I feel like it's been a crazy couple of weeks. We were not here last week at the end of the session, so we have a lot to catch up on. All of a sudden, the congressional races are starting to come together. We've got caucus and convention right after that. So a whole lot going on. Feeling relieved right now?
Oh, certainly. I mean, when you have this march towards dates, the legislative session, 45 very impactful days for the state of Utah. There's definitely a lot of things that are happening. We had our initiative effort that I'm sure we'll talk about. So there was a lot going on. And there's a degree of relief, but then you realize, wait, there's still a lot going on. So I guess we're still just right at it.
I feel like, Maura, we've been kind of in this tornado for a few years where I feel like there used to be downtimes. I don't know when those downtimes were, but I don't remember anymore. It's just go, go, go. Are you feeling the same?
Yeah, no, the break has gone. And whenever you're talking to anybody and they're like, oh, yeah, now you get a break, that's probably even a decade old. Yeah. I feel like between how early we start for elections, caucuses are coming, and just even the activity at the legislature, it'll slow down for a little minute, and already before the session ends, you're working on next year's legislation. Yep. You're working on who the stakeholders are, who the groups are. Interim studies are playing a bigger and bigger role and becoming, I don't want to say political, but they are becoming more weighted and in terms of prepping for them and participating in them. So study groups are already being defined and issues are starting to already happen relating to next year's legislative session. It's a little mentally exhausting. I think you do have to check out a little bit or you go crazy.
Are either of you doing anything to check out? Maura, you just got back from a vacation. So
I
you
did.
Gave yourself
I took
a small break.
I did.
Yeah.
I went with my child's schedule, not the legislator's schedule.
Nice.
I felt really like
rebellious.
Totally rebellious, and then really nerve-wracking because I'm like I was on my phone a lot more.
Because you were missing.
Yeah. So I mean I have 2 funerals in a row. So there's.
Oh, darn it.
Okay,
I know
that's not decompressing.
So it's not. So I'm going to be doing that for a minute, but yeah.
All right. Do you have anything more chipper than funerals to decompress, or is it just on to the next battle?
So we'll get out of town, my wife and I, with our little kiddos for a couple of days during their spring break. So
nice.
Looking forward to that and turn off the phones and just pay attention to them, but then jump right back in the fire when we get back.
I love it. Well, I want to talk about some of the fire and what's been happening. I'm going to get to the Herculean effort of the signatures in just a minute. I want to start, though, with the end of the session. We were talking about how there used to be 10 years ago breaks. And it's interesting because we talked about before the legislative session, sometimes they'd toss something over the clock so they didn't know what time and they'd keep doing business. Apparently, those days are over with because Senator Adams at the first of this week killed a bill that passed seconds after midnight. So my question is, Maura, why are we following the rules now? And we'll talk about the bill and what they were trying to accomplish in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, as with all sports, we now have an instant replay button, right?
Yeah, we do.
So, I mean, I feel like that's kind of what it was. Back in the olden days, you could... So
whose clock were you looking at?
Whose clock were you looking at? Because it has always been taken literally the stroke of midnight. Like it's always been sort of a fun act of saying really, and the statute is written in a way where it is specific.
Yep.
But this year, the clock ran out, and it really was contested, and then it was almost an instant replay situation. And when they were looking at how to interpret when the vote had started, this was a bill that was in the process of being voted on. Yep. The other thing that's fascinating about this is it was a consequential bill, not suggesting that others aren't, but this was not a straightforward. This had people for and against it. Mm-hmm. This had strong feelings and impacted many cities and potential counties in the future. Like it had some ripple effect. And so they were in the middle of voting. In the Senate, as many of our listeners know, it's a roll call vote. So you're going one by one. And speaking of it being instant replay, when you saw the recall of it, like they were talking about a 10% or a 10-second linger that happened from the dais right before. And had that 10-second linger from the dais not happened, you probably would have made it through
really
roll
was
call.
just about 10 seconds
Yeah,
was all that
about
it went over.
but
right?
it was later. It was contested by one of the senators, and it was later ruled that it had not actually completed its process before the strike of midnight.
Do you like that we're following the rules now, or do you like the olden days where you just went wild West style and just
I
went
think
for it?
you always follow the rules, and again, right now when it's all on video and you have a specific time where you all know what that time is, it's very different than, oh, look at the clock there versus a watch versus whatever. So, kudos to the legislature. I think they try very hard to abide by the rules and do things correctly, and I think they, for all intents and purposes, thought that they got it done in time. And when they look back at it, they realized, okay, well, there's a sincere question. So,
to Rob's point, they self-regulated, right? They said they immediately were like, and this would be the majority actually who said, listen, we think it came through, but also I do think we will see a change of behavior in which they are managing down to this now literal second clock.
Yeah, which is interesting. My next question is on this bill. Do we need to be making it so we can split counties? Is there a good reason to do that, or what's in this? Is this about politics?
I think you could certainly make a claim that it's a political question, but I do think it's an efficiency question. The last time that we split a county in Utah was when we split Wasatch County. So Wasatch County used to go clear out to Uinta County, and so you split it and you created Duchesne County. And there was this divide at the time historically when you look at it, where folks in Heber City and then folks out there in the eastern part of the county in Roosevelt, they just didn't get along because the issues and the needs on the east side were very different than the west. It was hard to travel back and forth. And so I think that was an example where the interests of those constituents on the eastern part of the state were better represented by having their own county. I think those same principles can still apply here. Now, this bill that was in question was specifically applied to, I believe it was a county that had 1 million people or more, with cities that would have large populations. So right now, it really would only impact Salt Lake County.
Yeah.
But down the road, had it gone into effect, it could have affected other counties as well. I do think that historical question, what is in the best interest of the constituents, is a valid, legitimate one, and it transcends the maybe political opinions.
It should be noted for this bill, though, that the originating bill sponsor has long had legislation focused on Salt Lake County. Mm-hmm. So this is a series of what, if you did not like this point of view, as I don't, it would be seen as a series of aggressive anti-Salt Lake County as it's constituted now, a series of pieces of legislation. And also, interestingly, it had a coalition of opposition, which was rural legislators who were like, we don't know that it is in the interest for a city to be able to break off. What does that precedent set with a city being able to break off? So it has a lot of nuance and some fear from rural counties for whom it doesn't apply yet. But philosophically, what does that do to the county structures? What does that do to the city structures? So many of us, I'm in this camp in which this was seen as an anti-Salt Lake County measure, and this bill sponsor has taken that approach.
I do think, though, that it's important because you're right. They have had this consistent concern, and I think it's a legitimate concern that they have, that their voice and the interests of their constituents, mainly in the southwestern part of Salt Lake County, they don't feel have been heard. And as somebody who lives in Salt Lake County, I certainly hope that collectively we make sure that every quadrant of this county is well represented and their interests and needs. I mean, you look on where I live on the East Bench, we're losing school size and we have smaller numbers of families and younger families. And then you go to the opposite side of the county and it's the exact opposite issues. They don't have enough schools and they have too many kids. And it does create these challenges and opportunities, and representative government is at its best when the people feel like there's a way that their needs can be heard and listened to and expressed. And so I hope from this, no matter what comes of this specific policy, that Salt Lake County does figure out to make sure that each of our quadrants and communities are well listened to.
And that's a whole nother question we'll be talking about with congressional races as well. Before we move on from the legislative session, I wanted to talk a little bit about another bill that passed pretty much at the last minute as well. And this was about the signature removals and better boundaries who had been mailing out envelopes that were I don't know if they were stamped or prepaid for if they wanted to send them back. This passed at the last second. Is this something that Utah Republicans for Representative Government help push forward? Is this a legislative bill? Where did this one come from?
So I'm certainly supportive of the policy, and Utahns for Representative Government, the entity that led the initiative effort, certainly was supportive of the policy. But this was a policy that had been proposed by actually a number of legislators. The underlying bill that it was a vehicle on had been out the majority of the session, and then there was a substitute that had been provided and discussed, or at least the principles of it had been discussed in committee, I think a week before. Some new language came up that still kind of did the same thing that had been discussed that last day, and then it passed, I believe, at 11:19 at night. So one of the last bills. I do think it's appropriate. You have in current statute, even before this bill that was passed, that there's a prohibition on any type of incentive, however de minimis it may be, to incentivize or coerce somebody into removing their name from an initiative process. And so having a pre-filled form in a prepaid envelope, return envelope, on a government form with a name that appears to be an official action, I think the whole effort is a little bit manipulative. And certainly I think the clarity that the legislature was wanting to reiterate that their opinion is that this is not appropriate, I think it was certainly within their purview.
So I think I learned how to judge this action in third grade. So my favorite sport was dodgeball. And halfway through, right, it was. And I don't want to name last names, but the first name is Kirk. And he, halfway through, tried to redefine what a brush was versus being a full hit on dodgeball. And you just can't change the game in the middle of the game, or you're a cheater. And you're probably losing if you want to change the game. This was just politics. It was the majority continuing to lose on this issue. And because they can't win on the playing field, they decided to change the rules of the game. They didn't want to wait for a court to decide. We have had these issues in the past. There's always issues with the cost of speech. We have had parties that pre-fill out forms. We've had parties that pre-fill out and return. We've had elections in which you've had return stamps. We have constituent mailings in which we allow constituents to write and turn our records back. And the notion that because it's easier for me, I somehow am not acting in my own free will and that I'm not exercising my own voice. So you see several thousand signatures that will still apply because even though Governor Cox woke up early the next morning to make sure that they could still change the rules of the game in the middle of it, those who had already submitted and then already processed, those will be applied. And you still can have a signature effort, this law states. So this is a call and response that has been going on from the legislature. Ironically, this is part of what Props 4 discussion is when the public asserts themselves and the legislature doesn't agree, they're punitive and they make it harder and they restrict it and change the rules of the game.
See, and I just don't see this as the changing of the rules. Like I said, I believe that state law already made this clear, and what
then they don't need to do anything. If state law is clear on this.
What the legislature is seeing is the legislature is seeing millions of dollars of outside money that are coming into Utah and confusing
which we have
folks.
had for years.
No, agreed. But I think the difference that you have here, and I'll tell you, I've heard from no less than 12 people directly to me who have sent in that form thinking that they were confirming their support for the Prop 4 repeal. And so they were calling, letting me know, hey, I sent it in. Now, I wish that they would have read it more clearly before they sent it in, but you have people who thought they were receiving in the mail an official document from a government actor with a prepaid envelope to return it. And their effort, their intention, was to confirm their signature on the removal effort. And unbeknownst to them, they actually sent in the removal of their name.
And you think had they not had it prepaid, they would have somehow read it better if they had to have affixed their own stamp? Because what we're talking about, that's two different things. That's switching the narrative.
No,
the narrative is that they thought it was an inducement. And in fact, the legislation didn't talk about an inducement. They merely just outlawed this procedure,
Correct, because the
which
inducement
makes
piece
a
already
a
exists
through
in-
line of a case for support for a legislative system not even existing, that really made it just a political move. Now, let me be clear. I do think they have the votes to do the political move. I think they won the political move. But to pretend that it wasn't merely that, that's where I find the insult. I'm like, listen, y'all have more cards. Like, just at least if you're going to do a power play, own the power play. Don't pretend this was somehow coincidental or not a political power play.
I don't think anybody is saying it's coincidental. I think they were responding to this bad action that they see that was
Bad
happening.
action?
Like I said, inducement is already illegal under the
Rob,
law.
you could name 10. I could name 10 campaigns who have done variations on this theme. This is not an uncommon practice. So now that we're clutching our pearls as though we have never seen this, and at the end of the day, it's speech. It's political speech, which should be the highest degree before big legislation, big government. I mean,
How is this
again, the
infringing on
conservative,
political speech, though?
because you've said this action is unacceptable. You cannot facilitate this way.
So anybody can still go and engage however they would like. They
Right.
Can go into
They're
the clerk's office.
encumbering this kind of communication.
I
mean,
guess
it's an encumbrance.
I see it completely different. If somebody is going to stop their action by not having that prepaid postage, then they don't really care that much about the issue. The issue that I had, and I believe that the legislature was responding to, and I commend them for this, is the holistic approach of the name of the pick that was being used to do this, the name on the envelope, the pre-filled government form, a prepaid envelope. It starts to appear as though it's an official action rather than just, like you said, political speech and free speech.
The hypocrisy on this, like, this is deep cleansing breath time with the hypocrisy,
The
on
hypocrisy,
this
though,
line.
If you look at the global collective, like you've been involved in how many initiatives? You've been involved in quite a few, and good on you. You have wisdom on this that I don't have, and experience on this that I don't have. All that you can control, though, is what have you done? What have you said? And I'll tell you, from my perspective, I have been consistent. I don't like this type of behavior that is right now happening against something that I care about, and I wouldn't like it if it was happening in favor of something that I care
would just
about.
like everyone who voted on this to be held accountable to, if you don't like naming picks and packs, if you don't like predetermination on political speech, if you don't like persuasion, I would just like you to dislike it all the time. And that is not even close to being true. I would love to go through right-leaning picks and packs, and just, if we're going to discuss how we name our picks and packs, there is
But
not a
none
clean
of that
hand
was in
among it. But I'm just
242.
saying, I know, but like, these are the rationales I'm being given for why it has merit. And I'm suggesting that it is not merit-based. It's in fact politically based. So own it, supermajority. You don't like when there's a renegade who's not going along with your philosophy, and you're very frustrated that someone dare disagree. And you know what? You got the votes. We'll see if you have the public support, which is an interesting discussion. But for sure, this action will be supported by both bodies of the majority of the legislature.
Yep, and I'm glad that they did.
And here's an interesting thing. Maura didn't think that you were going to make it past the finish line. I think that were you thinking they were going to get close, or where?
I didn't. I mean, I had always been open. In fairness, I think it was down to the end. It doesn't, but the end is the end, right? Before the
what
end
is it?
isn't.
April 20. What day is the last day? I forget.
Hats off on the distribution. Like,
Yep.
that's the trick. And they're both tricky. But you swept through the totals. The distribution is at 26 of the needed 29
29.
Senate
Yep.
districts. And those are tough. I mean, those are really tough markers. And the hard part is you have to close up shop and give your opponent 45
Yep,
unfettered days
they
to
get to
just
see. Yep.
sit and watch. And that, I think, is April 23rd. Am I wrong about that?
Well, it's all just based off of 45 days from the day that signature
but
was verified. So
I feel like the last of the last of the last, because
Yeah,
there's
is
a
April
verification
23rd, but-
final, and I want to say it's
Yeah, it is April
third-
23rd. I
third
looked
week
it up
of-
online.
okay.
Yeah, so we're getting
we'll
there.
hit the 45 days of the signatures themselves a little bit earlier. So we'll probably have a good idea that it's all done or said and done a little bit before that. But yeah, there is this extended period of time, and when we did meet before, I know the public numbers that were out there that were being reported by the LG's office were saying one thing. I felt a higher degree of confidence because I knew what we had gathered, and we scanned, I think, 98% of the packets. So I literally had photos of every page. So I knew, like, here's what we have, here's where they're at. We could go through and do a pretty good estimate of which signatures are going to be accepted and not. You can check and see, oh, this person signed, but they're not a registered voter. Well, that's not going to count. So you can kind of keep a good tab on those numbers. The thing that I think people were not listening, and I tried to answer this multiple times, they'd say, well, you're only at this and you only have this number of days. Well, I knew that I had turned in tens of thousands more that had not been counted yet. So it wasn't just the tens of thousands I had in my possession and the ongoing gathering we were doing. It was the tens of thousands I had turned in. But as I've said last time, this is my first initiative that I've been engaged in. I have mad respect for people who have done it. It is a very difficult process. It's an onerous process. It's a confusing process at times. And you know, even those initiatives that I adamantly disagree with, I respect the effort.
Is part of the gamesmanship not letting people know exactly how many you have? Because if you're in that final push, I'm assuming even if you're close, you don't want to tell people you're close because then they're not going to get out there and make those final efforts to sign. Was that part of the plan?
Yeah, there's certainly some of that from a messaging perspective to keep people motivated. But I'll be honest, it's less that and more you're just so busy trying to get it done and comply with all the aspects of what you need to do. It's not so much hiding the football as it is just trying to get the football taken downfield and do what you need to do.
Impressive effort. Last time I looked in, it was just shy of 166,000 verified signatures, so more than 20,000. And you got dangerously close, not really close, but sort of close in Nate Bluin's district, which kind of surprised me. I think it was like 87%. So,
yeah, that one I really wanted to get.
it would have been like the cherry on top.
And I'll tell you, there was a couple of districts in Salt Lake County that unfortunately, and I hope this never happens again for anybody on either side of the political aisle, there was too much violence happening against our volunteers. And I had to pull people out of 2 districts and no longer gather there. I could not feel okay if some of our people ended up in the hospital, and we had a couple of things that were just too concerning, and so we had to abandon those efforts.
What districts were they? Are you allowed to say or want to say?
I think people can look at the numbers and they'll see the 3 districts that we came up short on, and they can figure it out. But I've been on the record many times, and I don't care if it comes from the political left or the political right or any ideology. There is no place for that type of intimidation and violence and assaults, and I hate seeing it coming against an issue that I care about, but I would equally hate seeing it go against an issue that I disagree with. There's no place for that, and I hope that we do better.
I think we can all do better on that too. Definitely frustrations rising. I'm seeing frustrations rise. We're barely getting into our congressional race. This week, we finally have candidates starting to officially sign their names, get on the ballot, which is interesting to watch. I actually, when I gave us our show rundown, put a little map on here of the actual districts because I can't remember what districts are what. Honestly, I was like, what district am I in and what number? And Maura, before we even get to who is in here, you don't like how they're numbered. My brain doesn't like how we're numbered. Rob, are you liking how they're numbered?
No, it should go
Now,
top
a
down.
shared grievance.
But you're
should
number
be-
1, though. You're in the number
I'm
1
number
district.
2.
Oh, you are too?
Yeah,
You're not in the
I was number 1. No, I'm in 2 now.
So
yeah, I
I'm in
haven't.
1.
I have an objection to how we've numbered them.
I know. I would
I
like
think everyone does.
to
Let's-
start at the
let's
top of
have
the state
this
and go
be
down.
a unifying one. It needs to go 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it almost goes 1 and then 2 up,
2,
and then
and
you
then
kind of
kinda
go all
come
the way to the
down.
bottom to 3 and then back up to 4.
Yeah, I feel like
It's
Southern
weird.
Utah should be 4, but I'm in 4. So.
My glass half full part is they say you should change up your routine all the time to ward off dementia. So
Okay.
look at us. Look at us using our brains.
Our brains are going to be ready and
Yeah.
raring to go. So CD1, a ton of candidates, and they're still filing. I think last time I checked, Nate Bluin wasn't even on there. I do believe that he filed yesterday. But we have all of these candidates getting into the race. It'll be interesting to see who actually gets the signatures and what's going on. But even before people have signed, there was a public town hall this week for the 8 Democratic candidates who've declared saying they were going to run. I didn't realize who was doing this at first. And when I started looking into it, when I had a little time later, it was the 71% Coalition and Black Lives Matter, which hosted this public town hall. And I looked online and it was interesting because they had a pledge that candidates had to take. Ben McAdams didn't show up for this one. Maura, was this one that he should have participated in, or keep yourself at a distance because maybe too extreme.
A seasoned campaigner probably wouldn't have shown up for something like this. The flip side of that conversation is activist groups being very frustrated with not being able to demand. And it's a really hard, that this says a political consultant, but it's a very hard decision now in today's social media world. My experience is, left or right, most campaigns want to participate in as many forums as they can. But it is fair to weigh the consequences of showing up and not feeling like you were given a chance to be who you wanted to be and that it was just going to be used against you. So every campaign is now waiting, whether people think it should be this way or not. I believe it's a call and response between advocacy groups and and candidates, and that's on both sides about like, are you just going to use this to beat me over the head, or is this a legit forum? We even saw this debate bleed for the first time into debates, and are they fair or not? We do, as candidates and campaign staff, need to, I think, see how much we can put down our weapons and show up for stuff. But I think it's a fair calculation. Fair being even fair to saying what you want to say and being who you want to be.
Yeah, I think you had to have a pledge on
some of
this.
These things.
It was pretty anti-Israel, I think, from what they were doing.
The other thing that this indicates that I'm sure Rob will bring up is that because of the structure of this new district, not only are we going to see a lot of Democratic candidates, not only are we going to see a likely Democratic representative, we are going to see for the first time in a very long time, if one goes back even pre-Orton, if we have Orton and Matheson, we have had blue dog centrist Democrats. The makeup of this election and the makeup of the public conversation on partisanship right now may see Utah not only electing a Democrat, but may see them electing a firebrand. And this is an early 100%. Indication that we would not have had this dialogue even in a Democratic, which we've had before, a Democratic House seat. You still would have just been
McAdams,
seeing a rush to the center.
Well,
and this is not that.
This group, this town hall, you may have had events like this, but would it be the kickoff event? Would it be the first event? No. And I think to the point that's being made here is you are going to see, in all likelihood, the nomination process for the Democrat nomination to CD1 really taking this swing to the left. It's no longer going to be that blue dog Democrat of fiscal conservatism and kind of Utah traditional values. I think it's going to be more of these national left-leaning initiatives and priorities. I think you're going to be hearing Mamdani's name a lot more than you're going to be hearing about Utahns. And I think that's something that the voters in this district are going to have to weigh. Do you really want this polarized perspective coming from either party? And you know, it gets back to what we've been talking about in this whole Prop 4 and the implementation of Prop 4 through this judge. One of the founding principles of Proposition 4 was to have competitive maps. We have the least competitive map that has ever existed in Utah in my lifetime. You have 4 congressional districts that are unwinnable unless you are a Republican in 3 of them and a Democrat in the 4th. And it creates this scenario where you have the ability for it to become more of this polar dialogue rather than coming to the dialogue of what do Utahns need? What do our constituents need? And I think that's to all of our disadvantage to have that happening. I want Utah issues to be discussed by our candidates in both parties. I don't want it to be about Mamdani and Bernie Sanders and AOC and Donald Trump and all of these things. Let's talk about Utah. I think that would be better.
Rob and I agree on that. We disagree that this is the first cycle we've seen this level. I think what changed is there's a Democratic seat and 3 Republicans. We had that in the last Republican cycle as well. I also do see firebrands in all of them. So when I note the firebrand nature of
which could get more extreme to the right as well.
Karianne Lisonbee and Phil Lyman are extremist within their sides, or as far right as a Nate Blumen is far left. And so you see those disruptors who are questioning whether Blake Moore, who is currently in Republican leadership, asking if he's Republican enough, and if Celeste Malloy, who has worked for a sitting member of Congress and has been one of our most active members of Congress, you see her being questioned. So this discussion of how partisan and what kind of purity test we're going to ask for will come up, I think, in every single one of our congressional districts.
sure.
So I want to see where you guys see this going, because let's just take CD2. Is that, yeah, that's the top of the state. So yes. So that's where Blake Moore will be running. As you mentioned, he's in leadership. He's the fifth in power in the House when you look at it, which usually states like to see someone who has that kind of power in Congress. Karianne Lisonbee definitely has the same, further right crowd as Phil Lyman. Does she have a chance at beating an incumbent? A lot of people are mad at Blake Moore right now, saying this is his fault. He started better boundaries. He should have to run in CD1 and, face the music. What do you think?
I think this will be a test of inside baseball versus everyday Utahns. And I'm not suggesting that maybe there is no difference between inside baseball and everyday Utahns. Who's mad at Blake Moore are the same group of X thousand people following in graphic details. Among those are Rob and I. Like, we are every day. I don't know if the average Utahn is actually following along. The polling I have seen does not show Utah ranking the civic issue and the issue of Proposition 4. They are not ranking those among their largest concerns. Their concerns are affordability, the price of gas,
100%.
Education, all of those. So, and also Karianne, Blake Moore is an incumbent. Blake Moore has over $2 million in the bank. If he runs a successful campaign, one would think the power of the incumbency. But that is the argument that they're going to make. I think that those, I think both Carrie and Phil will run a more divisive or what is a purist campaign.
Oh, real quick though.
So your convention's going to get spicy.
Oh, it definitely is, and I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to it because we have room for a wide variety of Republicans in the party. That's the type of party I want us to always have. I want us to have a party that has people that are to the left of me and people that are to the right of me, but still unify around our party platform and believe that we can do that. So I'm looking forward to these different candidates. I do think that Karianne has an interesting path forward because she does have an extensive record of votes and leadership positions within the Utah House of Representatives. And I think that's certainly gives her a different track record than maybe Phil Lyman has, who he has his record of votes and campaigns. So I don't think that they're going to be lockstep. I think they're going to be different in their respective races. But the Utah voters and the Utah Republican delegates are going to have a great time in all of these races. They're in CD2. I was going to say one,
Yeah, I know.
but in
That's what I did the
CD2, they're going to have that opportunity to look at Karianne and Blake. As of right now, there might be others that file tomorrow.
Yeah.
But they'll have some choices there, and there's going to be these choices in these other areas, and I think it's good. I think the core issue, though, that this polarization, there's always going to be the difference of opinions within the parties, and sometimes you'll have an issue that comes up that maybe takes it to one extreme or the other. But usually in Utah, it has still been Utah-centric. This is where I see this year being somewhat unique is I think you're going to have more global and national issues that are raising to the top of at least the dialogue from these candidates. And I would like it to see that all return back to those local issues, the affordability and these things that really are at the forefront of Utahns' minds.
The other thing this might show this year is, again, are the delegates in a line with the registered primary voter? And the rub on the party has been, the rub on the caucus system has been that delegates no longer reflect the general Republican, Democrat, whichever one you're looking at. And that the delegates are not a reflection anymore of the general party point of view. And because of the structure of these races and because of the likelihood, well, for sure we'll have a convention winner, but likely we will also have primaries in all of these races. You will see both sets of voters and political participants put their votes in, and it'll be interesting to see if there is a gap between political activists
I think
and
especially for
regular
the
voters.
Democrat side, because Republicans have had this the last few years where the results of the primary, it's easy for people to pick and choose a few races and say, see, there's a complete disconnect. And then you can look at other races and say, no, it's still pretty lockstep. So we've faced that question and that criticism as Republicans. By and large, the Democrats have somewhat unified and just kind of moved forward. That's not going to happen this go around. So I think the Democrat Party here in Utah is going to face that same question. Looking at that.
That's not accurate because the last cycle, our most prominent Democrats actually chose an independent against a Democrat.
That was a wild card
We've
move.
had incredibly contentious
But that was
discussions.
a unified decision that you guys had that I
It
thought
was
was
not
bizarre.
a unified decision. If any Democratic delegate would just blow their minds with you telling them that was a unified decision. I mean, that was an extremely controversial decision.
Correct me if I'm wrong. At your convention, the majority embraced that, and that's why you guys went with that.
No, it was
that
very
decision and moved forward.
contentious. I
know
mean,
it's
that's like
contentious, but you
suggesting
had the
that you were
numbers.
unified out of the Celeste Malloy convention, and that was a bloodbath. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think it's equalization, and I think this year the Republicans and the Democrats are interestingly facing some of the same dynamics.
I want to talk a little bit about that because when you look back, Celeste Malloy had a hard-fought battle in convention. There were a lot of candidates. It was, very contentious in there. And that used to be the purity test, is if you would go and you would get the votes of the delegates in convention. I'm seeing new purity tests online where Phil Lyman, who before was like, I'm the winner, chicken dinner, I won at convention, I should be on the ballot, Cox shouldn't be. He's now making the purity test that he's gathering signatures, but he's gathering them with volunteers as opposed to as opposed to paying people. So that seems to be the new purity test, where it's okay to get signatures outside of convention, but you've got to do it with grassroots. Are you seeing that?
Oh, there's definitely some of that, and this is how I've always tried to approach being the chair of the Utah Republican Party, is to make sure that you just call balls and strikes.
Yeah.
And you're not leaning into one side or the other. And it was interesting in that last race. There were folks, and at times Phil Lyman wanted me to do more to support where he was at, and I didn't feel that the rules allowed that. And then later, Governor Cox wanted me to do more, and I didn't feel like the rules would allow that. But you shoot straight with people, and I think people have now seen, and some of these same candidates are coming up for a new race, and they know I will shoot straight. I'm not going to put my thumb on the scale for them. I'm not going to put the thumb on the scale against them, because ultimately it's the people of Utah that get to decide. And in this case, with the nomination, it's the people of our party. I'm one vote in that, but I'm just one vote. I'm facilitating a process that is fair, that is reflective of the principles of representative government. That's what motivates me here, and I'll stand by whatever the delegates and then the voters decide on that, and we're going to go all in on supporting our nominees.
Well, it's going to be a fun year, and the money's going to be flowing in ads, which is always exciting. I do want to mention that Utah CD4, which is not at the south end of our state, Kennedy seems to probably have the easiest race thus far, unless I don't know some of these names in that. Are you seeing that as well? We've got a Democrat in there, Johnny Larson. We've got Seth Stewart running as a Republican, Scott Hatfield, Russell Jensen, and then we have a Libertarian, Taylor Wright. I think that Kennedy was planning on filing officially tomorrow or maybe possibly today. Do you see him as the easiest incumbent win?
Yeah, I mean, he won't want us to say that. Everyone's like, please don't jinx me. But this is the most traditional, less known challenger to a known incumbent. Lucky for him, because this is his first standing as a go around as an incumbent.
Your first re-election.
So he's probably like, oh, good. I hope I can work hard and manage it, but I see it that way. I think that he's not seeing a challenger the way the other two are.
Well, and here's an interesting thing though that I'll point out. I know a couple of these names, a couple of them I don't. I haven't met them yet. But like Scott Hatfield, for example.
He's run before.
He's run before, but he's a veteran. And I know he has a life experience there. And so it's the type of thing that I think we sometimes get focused on, just the race and the big name candidate and who has a lot of money and who's an incumbent. And yeah, that may prevail and win the day a lot. But our whole system of government benefits by people raising important issues. And so I want to, hats off to all of the candidates in either party, in any party, who are willing to put their name out there and elevate an issue that's important to them. And my hope is that whoever our nominees are, and ultimately whoever represents the state of Utah, they're doing it in a way where they've learned along that process, and they've heard an issue that maybe they hadn't had a worldview on or a specific experience on, but a challenging candidate gives them something that then prepares them to better represent us. I think that's an important part of our process.
I also, before we leave this topic, want to go deeper into the rabbit hole, which is, I will tell you what I've been spending, or I haven't started these conversations, but conversations that have been coming to me way down the rabbit hole, is that in March of 26, starting to talk about convention, starting to talk about who's throwing their name as a challenger in, I am hearing as much strategy about Mike Lee and the open governor's race in 28. And do you and don't you set up in 26 to run 28? So I'm not seeing a ton of these names get on the ballot right now, but I will say, just to watch the layers in a political podcast of layers of intrigue, when one is in a midterm and one has a Senate seat and a gubernatorial open seat because Governor Cox is term limited, you're already hearing
Self-term limited.
Right. Yes. Yeah. He has said he does not want to run for a third term. You're already seeing the 28 set up. So for every 2 conversations I'm having about 26, I'm having 2 conversations about 28.
Well, and
There's a lot of golf and
sure,
fundraising going on. Yeah.
Well, a lot of that, and beyond even 28, I'm already getting a lot of conversations about the 2030 census and the fact that everything is indicating that in 2032, Utah will get a 5th congressional seat. So you have a couple of things. You not only have these 2028 races, should the Prop 4 repeal prevail, you will also have new maps in 2028 and potentially new maps there in 2030. You will definitely have new maps in 2032. So there's going to be a lot of musical chairs that happen that I think is probably appropriate for the state of Utah right now. The amount of growth that we have, the amount of change that we've seen the last few years and will continue to see by 2032, I think that's right around the time where Utah County is going to potentially start to surpass Salt Lake County.
Interesting.
In the number of people. I think it's an appropriate time for us to be moving around and getting new blood and new ideas and make sure that Utah is ready for the next 100 years.
I feel like we're wishing our lives away. Let's hang on tight to where we're at right now. If people are listening to all of this, and I know we have a lot of political junkies that listen, but there's people who are trying to learn along the way as well. What's your pitch for getting people to caucus night? Because it's always hard to get out the door, to take the time. It's not like you're just voting. You've got to go participate with your neighbors. You have to talk to them. And sometimes talking politics with your neighbors is not fun.
Yeah, key thing, and I think I've talked about this with the two of you before. I think there's been a massive disservice in our country where we have these cliches where you say you don't talk about religion or politics in friendly company. Well, all that's done is it's taught
where
us
else can you do
not
it
to
then,
talk
right?
about the things that are at the heart of who we are. You know, your belief, your faith, whether it's political or spiritual. That's kind of what motivates you. And I would love for people to be more comfortable being confident in their own skin and respectful to people who disagree with them. And I think the caucus process is a wonderful way to do that. It's not just about going and meeting strangers, which you'll meet some of those. By and large, they're your neighbors. These are people that, they might be a stranger, but they live just down the street from you. It's a good opportunity to get to know your neighborhood. And so March 17th, next week, Tuesday night, it's the same caucus night for both the Republicans and the Democrats. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's the same for the other parties. I believe a number of them it is.
I started searching and it looks like they are, yeah.
That was the effort that we all collectively did, was to lock in the same day to make it as easy on Utahns as possible that, hey, go pick where you want to go. And caucus is relatively easy. You show up, you get credentialed, you go into your respective room. It's usually at a high school or a junior high or maybe in an elementary school across the state. And you go and you spend a couple of hours. And the challenge I would give to folks, we have a country that is built on a history of perseverance and hard work. And you have people who have fought in wars. You have people who have walked across continents in defense of their beliefs. Giving a couple of hours once every 2 years is not that hard. You just have to make it a priority. And I get it's maybe not the most fun thing to do. All of our time is valuable, and we would love to watch a show or go on a date or play with the kids or
It's
all
a
of these
Tuesday
things.
night, guys.
But give a couple of hours once every 2 years. It's good for our system of government.
So the Republicans elect around 4,000 delegates. The Democrats elect around 2,700 delegates, give or take. And so you do have a consequential role. I think when we've been doing over the years, we've done tons of recruiting to go to caucus convention of both parties. And I think the key for anyone who's interested is that unintentionally what happens is you walk into these meetings and there's one or two folks who've been doing it since 1907, and you feel like you need to know something, and you feel like you don't have enough information, and you feel like you're not political enough, and you feel like you're not engaged enough. I would just tell you that if there is, I have some criticisms now of the caucus convention system, but I've also spent a lot of time pushing people there. And the one thing about how we do it, and this is the system that we have, is that it is an open door, actually. And you don't have to have a history. And you don't have, now, you got to whip some votes. You got to persuade people that you will be there. But it is this amazing no entry fee required, right? Like the biggest mental takeaway I've seen is that people cancel themselves out because they say they're not political. I think those of us who are too political would plead with those who are not political to start participating. We would like the gene pool a little more diverse with non-political people. It's important that average people, not averagely political people participate. And I will say the biggest barrier to entry is that you're like, I don't know enough. I don't get it. I don't care. I kind of care, but I don't care. The people who don't know enough should be the ones going. There is an entry fee for the Republicans that I wish they'd get rid of, in which you have to be a registered Republican. For Democrats, you don't. You could be any registration that you'd like. I think that's true of the other parties. Utah Forward may have changed theirs, but I think
they might.
I think
and it's tongue in cheek when you say fee. There's no actual fee.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
You do have
You're
to
right.
have
You
that.
do have to.
We need a sarcasm
Good correction.
expression.
Sarcasm ding there. You just have to be a registered Republican. You don't have to pay anything. But it is kind of fun. The other thing I'll just give a shout out, Rob, I won't take away Rob's plea to show up. But if for some reason that you, like me, think that St. Patrick's Day is a high holy day and you are totally disgusted with the parties for choosing St. Patrick's Day to be the caucus day, and you have to be at a party or a pub crawl, or you have some brisket that you need to attend to, if you can't, I will say still reach out to your party. There's a lot of volunteer positions that come up as a byproduct. Every once in a while, some of the delegate slots aren't fulfilled, and then there's the most complicated math problem that the parties will do around how you could get that position. There are sometimes you can manage your neighborhood and actually not be an elected delegate. So there are other ways to participate if you either are too intimidated, if it's not your jam to show up, or if you would like to celebrate the holiday that is St. Patrick's Day. Still reach out to your county party or your state party and say, hey, what could I do to volunteer? That might be a nice way to toe dip. But Utah's system has pros and cons, but one of its best pros is that if you are not hyper political, please join. That's who should be showing up.
Jump in and get involved. And here's the nice thing. So the
And
state,
younger people too, because sometimes we have an
younger
older generation. Yeah.
we need young people, and you look, the state parties, they facilitate this in the sense that it's an expression of the state party's efforts. But the whole organization, the whole planning, the logistics, it's all done on the local level. It's the county parties that actually execute the actual planning and the venues and all of that. What's nice about that is because it's the county and then it's the individual precincts, it really is, it's as local as possible. And as was mentioned, there's no fees to this. There's no requirement. You can show up. I've been a state delegate only twice. I've been going a long time. And I point this out because when I go to my caucus and I find somebody who's there for the first time, but they really believe in it, I'm so eager to actually throw my support behind somebody who's like catching the vision of being involved, especially a young person. If you have a young person who says, hey, I really believe in the Republican Party platform, I'm going to support that person 99 times out of 100 because I want to pass that baton, and I'm guessing the Democrats are the same. So that's been a big priority for us on the Republican side. Our college Republicans, they have a goal. I can't remember the exact number. I think their goal is like 250 college-aged delegates across the state that they're trying to go and recruit.
I haven't done this math for a while. I should probably redo it. But at one point, we did data mining to see the impact of younger voters. And at the time, if every college turned out, I want to say like 30% of eligible voters in that college, they would have single-handedly called the results of almost every single election. And particularly in midterms, particularly in inter-party stuff, those who show up make the agenda.
College Republicans, you heard it.
And Democrats.
And Democrats and all.
Independents.
I feel like
and
Democrats
Utah
have
Forward
a better
Party.
hold on college
The young
campuses
folks.
with
I
young
don't know.
folks.
Our college Republicans are killing it. 3 years ago when I came in, we only had maybe 40 active college Republicans in a meaningful way, statewide. And now we're into the hundreds we are thousands who have signed up. but hundreds who are actively engaged on a weekly basis in at least one meaningful event, sometimes
Now,
4
again,
or 5.
I hate to keep sharping on that, but you pick St. Patrick's Day and then you tell the young folks to come. I just don't understand it. St. Patrick's
I
Day.
didn't
Not
even
ideal.
think about that.
Not
Do you
ideal.
think that that was part of the Charlie Kirk wave? Because I feel like in the last couple of years of his life, a lot of the movement he has had was getting college Republicans who otherwise Democrats had always had the stronghold on campuses, but maybe got a lot more kids involved in politics.
Absolutely. Turning point action. Charlie Kirk had a large part to play in this on the political right. But you even have things like TikTok. TikTok has opened up political expression for all political ideologies that has been approachable and digestible by younger audiences. So I think there's a whole host of things that right now are going that it behooves all of us who have been involved in the process to make sure when young people show up, we reach out to them in friendship and mentorship, and more importantly than even telling them how to do things, we close our mouth and we listen and we let them be a part of the process.
If we're also staying on public service announcements, the data on the fact that when your kid turns 18 and votes in the first eligible election, they will become a lifetime voter versus the data if they skip their first major election and them never really catching the bug. If you know someone of coming close, really make it a thing to register to vote and really encourage them, regardless of how they vote, getting people in the habit of voting. And mark your calendars for April 25th.
Yeah, that's
which
what
is the
State
convention
conventions.
date.
Where are the Democrats doing theirs?
I don't know.
I looked
we're
it up
down
and I
at
wrote it down.
UVU.
There,
Republicans
I
at
think at the
UVU.
convention center in Sandy, maybe. I
Gotcha.
looked it up and I can't remember. But yes, take part in it. My son had a friend, his first year in college, who actually signed up, went on caucus night, became a delegate, and said that it was the most fun he'd had at the convention and just seeing the process of how it works. So, yeah, if you've got the time and you can
And
do
you
it.
get a lot of attention.
Yes, when you're
Yeah.
young and cool. So do
and
it.
you're a delegate. People are wanting to talk to you.
That's right. So I think it's a great thing to get involved in. So we've got those coming up. I wanted to touch on a couple national things really quickly because I think this could have a big play in our congressional races. And as we're talking about politics, we're still looking at the, do we call it a war in Iran at this point, happening right now. Americans seem to, Rob, not be very much behind this. I think in the past, Republicans have been very supportive of war efforts, what's happened in the Middle East. I think a lot of people are frustrated saying Trump ran on saying no new wars, we're going to stay out of this, America first. Where do you see this going and support as we're heading into the midterms with people frustrated about high gas prices, the cost of human lives, and our American troops and soldiers?
Yeah, excellent question. I think there's a degree of patience that the country, out of patriotism and deference, will give, but it needs to be clearly communicated and transparent, and there needs to be a path, and that patience can start to wear. Like we've talked about, affordability is going to be one of the bigger issues, and so gas prices and what that does to the cost of goods will be concerning. We've tragically had 7 individuals who have been serving their country who are not coming home. And we have to always have extreme reverence and gratitude and support for those families that have lost those individuals, not to mention those beyond who have been severely injured. So I think we are still in this time. I mean, we're 10 days into this,
Yeah.
11 days into this. Where Iran was engaged in a 47-year of aggression or 47-year effort of aggression towards the United States, and has been unwilling to remove the vernacular of death to America and pursuit of nuclear weapons. And so I do think there was an urgency to address those. Now the question is, in the weeks and maybe a couple of months ahead, how is that being addressed? And is there an off-ramp? If it starts to go beyond that, I think it could be a challenge for our country.
I think Trump's erratic decision-making style isn't well suited for wars. And you can get away with it sort of with what he's been doing, certainly in America. But the other thing is, this goes against a core tenet that he sold his base. So this is the first issue that I have seen that potentially could erode his base, depending on how it rolls out and further. This clearly is alienating the middle. That's what you're seeing in the slight. I think it's only in the low 50s of total Americans. And I think it's the eroding of the middle who doesn't want to see this action. But I do think it's the first time also his lack of ability to articulate and continue with a case for support. Sometimes it's interesting because even when we don't believe someone's case, we test their conviction and they're repeated on that. That shows up in like Bush and his justification. It was consistent. It had a through line. Whether you believed it or not was a different story. Trump has already given us 2 or 3 reasons and then changed his mind, and they disagree with each other. So, and the seriousness of the consequences of how he makes decisions and how he goes forward. The other complicating factor for any president is that you're taking this action. He didn't get congressional buy-in before. He keeps changing why, and you have elected officials who are also needing to talk to their constituents about how they feel about this and how they're going. And I think you're going to see a need for many, and I'm just using Republicans in this because Trump is a Republican. They're going to have to more consciously decide whether they are going to disagree on this issue, where I don't think you would have seen them needing to disagree as much with domestic policy, but they are going to need to disagree or agree on this war action. And because they deal with lives, because they deal with what is perceived as a promise from the Trump administration, this is a big quagmire for them. He's a wily coyote, so we will see if he can figure out how to get through this without being able to give us a really strong case for support, I think, about why he did it.
I do hope that Americans, regardless of what their faith traditions may be or are not, but if you're a person of faith, I hope that people are prayerful for President Trump and elected officials that are making these decisions, certainly our military. But I would hope that people would add their prayers, and I'll certainly continue to add mine, that we can find peace, that people on both sides, in Iran, in the United States, and Israel, that innocent lives are protected where they can be, and we can find a path forward that is not so committed to destruction and violence. Hopefully the holy season of spring that a lot of faiths express core values around, Easter being that for Christians and myself. I'll certainly add my prayers and hopes that we can get that off-ramp quickly.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will hope that those prayers include the United States and Israel stop being the aggressor, right? I mean, this was a war we chose. Anywhere. This was not a war that we had to engage in. I'm not speaking to the merit of why, but we were the aggressor in this, and that is a role we need to reconcile.
A lot to reconcile with. And just finally, before we leave, I think a lot of people have forgotten about this because it's a partial government shutdown. We're almost a month into this. You flew, I flew. I don't know if you've flown recently.
Not recently.
But I've been impressed. There have been some really long lines at the airports where they don't have enough TSA officials. Here in Utah, we have families that haven't been getting a paycheck for a month now. They've been working. The lines were quick and smooth when I went through there. Same at Newark and JFK. So we have a lot of people out there putting in the hours without the paychecks right now, and hopefully that will end for them soon,
and full stop, this is government failure. Like, nobody gets a victory lap right now. If you are in charge and you wanted the title and you wanted the mantle of leadership, it is entirely unacceptable that you can't fulfill the responsibility of keeping our government open. We are the strongest, richest, most amazing country that's ever existed, and you can't even keep all dimensions of our government. We should be intolerant of this, and we should not be listening to spin on the fact that if you currently hold a title, you should take personal accountability for the fact that you can't even do your basic job.
Yeah, pull it together, people. So, all right, we're going to be watching this. Before we leave, anything you want people to be paying attention to, aside from what we've all talked about here, that you've got on the docket that you're like, okay, we're watching this?
I just think the core thing is I need to express gratitude and thanks to all of the Utahns, 225,000 Utahns who signed our petition to put it onto the ballot. And going through that validation process, we're high 160,000, and to each of them, thank you. And feel confident as you're being asked to remove your name. Don't remove your name. Let the people of Utah make this decision come November. I believe soundly in the principles of representative government. Let's let the people represent themselves and decide on this issue. Let's look forward to people next Tuesday going out to caucus to build representative government. Let's support all of these candidates who are putting their name forward with hopefully really good ideas. and then see where we go forward. And collectively, after November, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, we're all still Utahns. Let's figure out ways to work together on the issues that will improve the lives of our families, our friends, and our neighborhoods.
When you're the ideological minority, it's really hard to stay engaged. And so because of the hypocrisy you see, because of the dominance that you see and what is perceived as unfairness. But the big test is to engage, because again, the more people who participate, the better the results are. The one thing that's so interesting about cynicism is I've been doing politics for most of my career, or at least nonprofit work, and one would think that in my arc of cynicism, which I have, I believe more that individual efforts matter. So I have seen more that single people have made huge differences. Inexperienced people who are just saying what they should say. So where I am cynical about many things, and certainly after the legislative session, I am cynical right now, but I have seen where individual actions actually are making a bigger difference. So I'm really sanguine and really excited when anyone decides to participate, because I've seen over and over that it actually makes a difference. It's really hard to make that case because you sound super Pollyanna-ish about it, but it actually matters when people decide to step up and start having a conversation.
So have those conversations. Your voice matters. Thank you so much for joining us this week for another edition of Take Two. And we've got a lot to talk about as we head into the spring.